Welcome to Action Hound Media, the site and channel all about action. Life's boring, get some more action into your life. All right, so what made me a Bigfoot believer? So if you saw the video Guns Saved My Life, you know that guns, once I got into guns, it opened up a whole new world for me. I got into archery, I got into hunting. That led me to going out in the woods more and trying to study the wildlife in the forests. And then it got me thinking, wow, these bucks that I never see during the day and outside of the rut are there's just tons of them in the forest, you know, and you never see them. They're nocturnal and they are quite large animals, these bucks. I mean, like the 10-pointer is huge, right? So I was thinking to myself, if a large creature like that could stay in the woods undetected for the most part, then other big creatures are out there that we never see. I mean, like look at bears. You hardly see bears, right? But they're out there and they're big. Moose, elk, other animals like that are very large animals, but they go relatively undetected, except during hunting season when the rut brings them out, right? So then I started thinking about this Bigfoot phenomenon. All right, I wasn't sure if it was real or not. So I started watching documentaries, and the more I watched the documentaries, the more it made sense to me that it's quite possible that a huge, intelligent primate could be living in the woods. So my next step was I went on a BFRO expedition. And as I've mentioned in a previous video, if you want to get into Bigfooting, go on bfro.net and sign up for an expedition and you can go on it. I think it's like $450 now for your first one. So I went on my first expedition. We went to Massachusetts and there were about 30 people in the expedition. And I'll be quite honest, I didn't think anything was going on. We didn't have any encounters. There was too many of us going into the woods. There was no way that we were going to have any kind of Bigfoot experience with that many people in the woods making so much noise. So that expedition was a bust. At this point, I was very skeptical. You know, I didn't think any of this was going to happen, having an encounter with a Bigfoot. But I went on another one. Another one was in New York, in upstate New York. I went on that one. That was my second expedition. And during that expedition, on the first day, two people, a brother and sister, said they saw one in the woods. And it was right across from our base camp. That was interesting. So we went to where they had seen this creature. And we were looking around. They said it was a 6-footer or something like that. So it was probably a juvenile. But the interesting thing, it was very close to the base camp, right? So basically, they had a sighting on a ridge, and there was a street, and then there was our base camp right across the street, maybe a quarter of a mile from the base camp to the actual sighting. So base camp was basically, the road was here, the ridge was here, and base camp was here. There was a house on the base camp, and on the right side of the house was a big, huge campfire and seats and a few tents there and trailers. And then on the left side of the house is where I pitched the tent. So the house was in between me and the campsite, basically. That night, we went to the ridge to hopefully see this creature or creatures that were in the woods. We sat there for a few hours, and I didn't really think anything was going on. I was very skeptical. So around 12:30, I went back to my tent and I went to sleep, right? At about 5:15 that night, I heard a really strange sound. I was in my tent and it went something like this. It went like this. Something like that, but super loud. And it was so loud and guttural, I felt it in my chest. And it was a really weird sound. I thought, okay, so it's right there. But I was so tired, I lifted my head and I went back to sleep. And then I said to myself, wait, that was such a strange sound. I have to investigate. I have to see what that is. I mean, it's only like on the other side of the house. Maybe it's some of the other people there were just blasting out sounds from a speaker or something like that. But anyway, I figured that the other people would have heard it and would explain what the sound was. It happened twice too. It was too loud, just like that. Super loud, super loud. I put on my boots on. I walked around the house and I was expecting a whole bunch of people there. I turned the corner around the house where the campfire was, and nobody was there. Nobody was up. Nobody heard this sound except me, okay? And it was super loud, and I'm saying to myself, what is going on here, right? So I'm walking around like the tents and the trailers, and all I hear are people snoring. And I said to myself, oh my God, there's something out here. I was kind of getting worried. So I sat by the campfire and I'm flashing my flashlight across the woods and stuff. I wasn't sure what that sound was, right? So I took a walk down the street and I said, this is a bad idea. I'm all alone. Nobody heard the sound. Could be a dangerous situation. So I sat at the campfire for the rest of the night and nothing else happened, right? In the morning, I felt like I was a little crazy, and because I was the only one that heard the sound, I talked to the group leader and they said, all right, just tell your story at the debriefing in the morning. We all got together in the morning. I told my story. Another person said that something walked by their tent without a flashlight, an upright figure, whatever. The strange thing about all this is that if Bigfoot is such an elusive creature, why would it make such a crazy noise like that in the middle of the night, like trying to wake people up, right? So this one gentleman from the group said he surmised that the Sasquatch were testing to see if anybody was awake. So it went whoop, to see if anybody was awake. And if nobody was awake, they were going to come in and maybe explore whatever was in the campsite. Now, the day before, there were juveniles seen in the woods, and juveniles are much more curious, and they would behave in a matter where they would do some very risky maneuvers like coming into a campsite. That kind of made sense to me. An elusive creature, they want to keep hidden and all that, but a juvenile might make a sound like that, see if anybody's awake, and then come into camp and explore. So I really believe that I heard a Bigfoot that night. I've never seen one, but I've heard one. And, I went on the internet and I compared sounds, and I'm trying to find sounds that sounded similar to this. And the only one that I found was an ape, except an ape will go like that, right? No increase in pitch. One of my professors said that, when you ask a question, you have an increase in pitch, like, where are you going today, right? So it made sense to me that this creature was asking a question, trying to see if anybody was awake. By doing that, because I was awake, I showed up at the campsite, at the fire. They did not proceed further into the campsite. I think if I waited maybe another 5 minutes, I may have actually seen one coming into the campsite when I turned the corner around the house. But that was my first real Bigfoot experience. I've experienced other things. I've done an investigation upstate where a lot of weird things were going on. I've been on other expeditions. I also go do investigations in Connecticut with a bunch of guys who have a lot of evidence. We even have visual evidence. So all these things will come out in future episodes, but I just wanted to give you a little taste of my first real Bigfoot experience. Action Hounds Unite.